Only you can prevent forest fires. We've all heard it, most often from a cartoonish Ursine Ranger wielding a shovel as he encourages his viewers to take a stand against wildfires. However, it seems he has done far more harm than he has good in recent years. Smokey the Bear has long been a figurehead of an environmental protection movement known as preservation. Preservation calls for the isolation and protection of nature from humans, leaving it fenced off away from human intrusion into it. Its alternative, conservation, seeks the proper usage of land by humans. By maintaining and tending to the land, one may then make sure that it is healthy. This is conservation or preservation, and it is the debate that has set this world alight. I'm Ethan Peacock. Let's begin. We begin today with a very simple question. Is the conservation doctrine of environmental protection more effective in the protection of New World forests than preservation? And to this I say, most undeniably, most truly, yes, conservation is more effective than preservation because it allows for the control of overgrowth, it allows for the restoration of natural, healthy forest fire processes, and additionally, preservation is simply not feasible in this modern era due to the damage that has already been done unto the land around us. Overgrowth. We've all seen it most often in our yards. However, this can have a devastating impact on our forests. Shown here is the truly negative impacts. Preservation, it fences off the land, it prevents humans from going into it, it prevents management of it. Good in theory, but indigenous and native species have a tendency to quickly grow all over the land. As shown here, this is a kudzu vine that has eaten entire forests and killed them off, choked them, starved them from all of the nutrients and the sunlight that they need. But they're not even the only kind that has a tendency to do this. Other invasive species such as the silk tree and the black locust tree will kill off all of the species that live underneath their canopy. And even indigenous species that grow quickly, when not properly kept in check, will have the same impact. The Douglas fir, the sweet gum, the honeydew tree, all can kill off vast swaths of land. And shown here is a picture of this in play, as one might say. A resilient versus a weak forest. Here, we see a nice little diagram of a resilient forest. A forest fire starts, burns through the land, raises all of the undergrowth, burns to the ground. All of those nutrients enter to the soil, and like a phoenix, new life bursts from the ashes. However, an unhealthy forest, this overgrowth has climbed up the trees, grown everywhere, and when a forest fire is lit, it roars up into the canopies of the trees, kills them off. It can even kill old growth trees that have lived for centuries because they are no longer able to get nutrition or sunlight, not even able to make their own food. And it just continues to kill off these elder trees while leaving the undergrowth pretty much intact. And so on until it becomes a vicious cycle. And there are very few places where this has been more recently, more viciously depicted than the recent Ute Park fire burns, where hundreds and thousands of acres were lost to an unhealthy forest fire that decimated vast swaths of the Rockies. This overgrowth can have devastating effects, such as much higher risk of fires in areas. It can have much faster burning fires, which makes it harder to control. Then furthermore, it leads to a higher risk of the previously aforementioned crown fires, in which the fire jumps up into the canopies and kills off the trees. Many thousands of acres are lost every year to these preservation different practices. However, there are still those who fight for preservation. There are still those who claim that nature should be left as it once was, before the humans came in, before they interacted with it, before it was blemished and blighted by humanity. And truth be told, from the bottom of my heart, I must agree. However, it is simply not feasible, as there has been immense changes that have occurred. For instance, the tragedy of the passenger pigeon. Once upon a time, these incredible species roared across the nation, sojourning from the vast reaches of Canada down to Florida. They flew in flocks of millions strong. They accounted for as much as 25% of America's avian population. However, their reign was not to continue. Hunters found them easy pickings with their flintlocks and their muskets and their traps and their knives. And within just 150 years of westward expansion by settlers, they're all extinct. In 1914, September 1st, the very last pigeon died in captivity in the Cincinnati Zoo. Here lies Martha, overlooking the vast region that once was her home. And their disappearance has had incredible and far-reaching impacts on the forest. Shown here is a map of their breeding territory, stretching all the way up from Canada, right on down to Florida. And there are many, many species that relied on these continental migrations to thrive and live. However, now that they are gone, they are no longer able to reproduce as they once were. They can't take their seeds across the nations anymore. And these populations now live in threat of extinction. But not all hope is lost. There are still a variety of conservation methods that have been recently introduced and from ages untold ago. There are still many methods that we may use to turn back these tides of destruction. For instance, as shown here, a relatively new method that has shown immense promise in North America is called thinning, in which all of this overgrowth is cut out and removed manually so that all of this healthy greenery can sprout back up in a healthy manner. Additionally, there are many, many ancient methods that may be used. For instance, we may use conservation methods that are used in indigenous America and Australia called controlled burns, in which these small cool fires are lit, they burn away the undergrowth, and are put out when finished. And these have been remarkably efficient in protecting areas at risk from forest fires, as shown in the College Board stimulus, using ancient wisdom to create a new world. This damage is not yet fatal. There still exists a world in which we live, there still exists a world to love, and there still exists a world that can bounce back. Together, we may work together, and we may create a better future. We may introduce all of the many methods previously aforementioned, so that we may leave a legacy for the generations that lie ahead. Thank you all for coming. This is my works cited page.
All right, you can stay right there. I have two questions for you.
Good.
First question, what information did you need before you began your research, and how did that information shape your research?
I first needed to begin by answering the most base question of this, which is, what is conservation? What is preservation? So I went on a little deep dive into the history of each movement and found both the philosophical reasonings of both, as well as the kind of mechanical underpinnings of it. So understanding this vital distinction really helped me to figure out, which one is most effective? Which one can actually have an impact on the world around us?
All right, and last question. What advice would you have for other researchers who consider this topic in the future?
I would say first and foremost, do not look simply at the words on the page in front of you. Do not just look at academic papers and charts and graphs and data points. Go out into the world around you and see how this impacts all of the forests, all of the woods, all of the trees. This has an impact on each and every one of us. It can be seen down the road, behind your neighborhood, across continents. It is a universal struggle with humanity.